Let's talk now about a little bit of history, okay? And we did this in last season in the show that we did on Calvinism. I'm going to go through it again real quick. This is not going to take long, okay? Okay. I wrote a little blurb here. When I say Calvinist, I use this to refer to being what is known as a 5-point Calvinist, blah, blah, blah. The debate begins with Pelagius and Augustine in the 5th century AD. So this is a very old argument, about 1,600 years old. Okay, it did not start with Calvin. A lot of people do not realize that. Jacob Arminius was born in Holland in 1560. He died in 1609. That's what Jacob Arminius is, the person that Arminian theology is named after. You might also hear it as Wesleyan theology. He was much later. Okay.
Wesley was much later.
Wesley was much later.
And Caleb, I need to correct you. It's Jacobus.
I'm sorry, Jacobus. Yes.
Jacobus
Arminius. John Calvin lived before him. John Calvin lived 1509 to 1564. Now, if you remember, I said Arminius was born in 1560. So he was born 4 years before Calvin died. Okay? Let's get into the history of where this debate really took off. Okay? Now, keep in mind, this is the 1600s, and so the Reformation is now in full swing. And this all takes place a year before the King James Version Bible is actually produced. King James Version Bible was produced in 1611. In 1610, followers of Arminius protested against the Belgian Confession of Faith and the Heidelberg Catechism. This might not seem like a big deal for us today, but this confession and catechism were the official confessions, and therefore the doctrine of the Church of Holland. Remember that the separation of church and state was not something implemented until much later. Okay? So the catechism and all that kind of stuff, it was like the official, it was like the Pledge of Allegiance, kind of. You did this catechism, you did this confession of faith. That's what the state of Holland believed. Therefore, what the official church believed meant more than just what the preacher was speaking about on Sunday. A synod was called to order in 1518. Okay, now this is several years after the King James Version Bible is produced, which is now known as the Synod of Dort, or the Synod of Dort. This synod met over a period of 7 months, in which they had 154 sessions to discuss the 5 points brought forth by the Arminians. In the end, the 5 points of Arminius were rejected by the synod and declared heresy. The council did not think it enough to simply reject the 5 points put forth by the Arminians. They in turn drew up 5 points to refute the Arminians. These 5 points were rooted in the Bible, but also leaned heavily on the theology and teaching of John Calvin. Therefore, the 5 responses to the 5 points of Arminianism are called the 5 points of Calvinism.
Right. And why that's so important is because people might think that, like, Calvin sat down with a pen and said, let's see, I need 5 things. Right. He didn't.
He wasn't even alive.
Right. And these are a response, not... the 5 points of Calvinism are a response to an Arminianist proposition or set of propositions, not the other way around.
Exactly. So that's a main point. When we say I'm a 5-point Calvinist, Calvin didn't come up with these 5 points, and we'll talk about what these 5 points are here in just a few seconds. First, I want to say this is from that book that I referenced earlier, which is Evangelism and the Sovereignty of God by J.I. Packer. J.I. Packer says. He's talking about the difference between Arminianism and Calvinism. This is what he says. The difference between them is not one primarily of emphasis, but of content. One proclaims a God who saves. The other speaks of a God who enables man to save himself.